Cold open. The glow from a file named Confidential PDF washes over my face sharp at the center, fading at the jawline. The rest of the office sits in shadow, just shapes and corners waiting for the night shift to claim them. The overhead lights have already shut off. Only the screen breathes. A faint flicker runs through the bottom of the document. Not a glitch. A hesitation like the file itself is deciding what to reveal. My finger stalls above the trackpad. A single held breath. A slight ache rises in my wrist, small but precise. My tells always show up before my thoughts line up. I scroll slowly. The harassment report loads line by line, each sentence arriving too clean, too curated. The kind of neatness that's less about order and more about control. I lean closer. The blue light cuts a narrow line down the center of my face, splitting it in half. One side illuminated, one side in shadow. Appropriate. I zoom in on a tiny annotation barely visible unless you know what to look for. A letter sits half a pixel too high. The spacing is off by a fraction. Almost nothing. Which always means something. That thin edge of wrongness presses fully into me now. It's not dramatic. It never is. It's a quiet click inside my head, like the moment a lock turns without a sound. I open the metadata tab. The list of version histories expands. I scan through. My brow tightens a millimeter. Last edited by someone who shouldn't have been anywhere near a harassment file. Not the case manager. Not HR. Not compliance. A name that only appears when things need to be cleaned. A fixer. The kind who writes in passive voice and deletes in active silence. I'm suddenly aware of the room behind me. The hum of the air vent. The distant elevator bell. The soft rustle of a desk flag 2 rows back, shifting as the AC cycles. Everything feels too still. I scroll back to the body of the report. The complainant's statement sits politely in bullet points, trimmed into corporate digestibility. No emotion. No detail. The edges sanded down. Black women rarely appear in these cases with full voice. I know that. I feel it. I've lived it. There's always a hand smoothing our stories into manageable shapes. Except the original version of this case wasn't supposed to look like this. I remember snippets. I remember depth. I remember words that carried weight. Words someone clearly decided did not belong. I click View Previous Versions. A timeline pops up. A few revisions. Then, one big jump. One identical timestamp across multiple documents, too perfect, too aligned. Batch change. Never a good sign. I open the most recent unaltered version. The screen loads slow, as if the system itself hesitates. Then, a section header, followed by nothing. A blank block. Not spacing. Not formatting. Erased. I look at the left margin. The cursor tries to align with something that's no longer there. Like a ghost paragraph. Like an empty seat at a meeting where someone used to speak. My jaw locks for a moment. An instinct I've learned to hide in rooms where I am expected to be composed, precise, unshakable. I tap the arrow key. Nothing appears. I drag the mouse. Still nothing. Whoever deleted the section wanted the gap to look natural. They just didn't expect someone with my eye or my patience to catch the tiny fracture across the digital grain. I sit back slightly, letting my hands hover above the keyboard. The silence around me thickens, the kind found in corporate buildings after 8 p.m., when the day people have gone home and the truth becomes easier to hear. I read the closing note. Matter reviewed. No further action. The letters feel weightless, like foam covering something burning underneath. HR told me the same line 3 weeks ago. We're handling it internally. I thought they meant process, protocol, standard procedure. Now I hear the sentence as it actually is. A coded message. A boundary. A warning. I exhale slowly, letting each breath leave me with control. I lean forward again, close enough that the warm air of the laptop brushes my chin. I study the white void where a paragraph should be. It's too large, too deliberate, too quiet. The kind of quiet that tries to bury something still alive. I run a fingertip along the screen, following the invisible outline of the missing text. The glass feels cool, unnaturally cool for a device that's been running this long. My nail stops exactly at the point where the deleted section starts. My finger anchors there. There's a specific stillness that settles in my body when truth begins to shift into view. Slow, patient, undeniable. A stillness born from being a Black woman in corporate spaces where precision is necessary, where being right is never enough, and where every move must be exact. This is that stillness. I click the system log. 2 edits sit back to back, less than a minute apart. Same editor, same timestamp, which means the removal was fast, efficient, rehearsed. Whoever did it expected no one to look deeper. I straighten my back, a small micro gesture, nearly invisible, but grounding. Another breath tightens at the base of my ribs. I notice something odd in the footer. A small fragment of text that didn't fully delete. Just 2 words. Escalation recommended. Then, nothing. Cut clean. My stomach hardens, not fear. Not shock, certainty. The kind that lands like the last piece of a puzzle dropping into place. I whisper into the room, not loud enough for anyone to hear, but firm enough that the air seems to shift. There it is. I close the metadata window and look at the white gap again, letting the silence sit. Letting the truth sit. Someone touched this file. Someone cleaned it. Someone rewrote a woman's experience into something easier to ignore. I rest my hand against the screen 1 more second. My thumb presses lightly against the glass, steady, intentional. The thought settles, anchored, undeniable. Someone didn't want this truth alive. And now, I'm the one who found the pulse. Would you walk away or fight back? Tell me in the comments. Cold open. The conference room light snaps on, too bright, too white. It hits the table first, bouncing off the glass surface like a cold blade, then climbs up the walls until every shadow disappears. I blink once, letting my eyes adjust. The room feels sterilized, as if someone cleaned it not for hygiene, but to erase traces. The long conference table chills the underside of my palms as I rest them lightly near my notebook. I don't sit all the way back. I rarely do in meetings like this. The chair gives too much. The table gives nothing. I want the table. Across from me, HR shuffles a folder. The sound is small paper sliding against paper, but in the stark quiet of the room, it lands with weight. I slide the printed summary forward. Here's the report. Restored metadata. Version history. Missing sections. The HR representative Janet gives the kind of half-nod people use when they're not planning to read what you're handing them. Her eyes stay fixed on the folder in front of her, not the documents I brought. A micro-dodge. She clears her throat softly. Patrice, I appreciate your thoroughness. The pause before thoroughness is intentional, the corporate version of a raised eyebrow. I fold my hands together. This case requires review. She exhales through her nose, barely audible. Her fingers grip the edge of her folder, subtle but tight. Due to confidentiality protocols, she says, we're limited in what can be revisited. Another dodge. I watch her shoulders, not the words. Shoulders always tell more truth than mouths. Hers shift inward by a fraction. Protective. Like she's bracing for something that isn't even happening out loud yet. I slide the metadata printout a little closer. It was altered. She doesn't touch it. Some documents undergo standard formatting updates. There it is. The corporate fog. Words arranged to sound procedural while meaning absolutely nothing. I tilt my head slightly. No formatting protocol deletes entire sections. A beat. Her left thumb presses against the folder spine. A rhythm, barely a tap. Anxiety disguised as composure. Only someone trained to watch micro-movements would notice. The overhead lights hum faintly. In that harsh brightness, every detail feels amplified. The metallic edge of the table, the muted shine of her badge, even the faint shadow under her eyes. She sits up straighter. Patrice, even if something does appear, it's unusual. Accessing certain archived materials isn't permitted without senior authorization. Another non-answer. Then request authorization, I say. Her smile attempts softness. It doesn't reach her eyes. These matters are typically handled internally. A familiar phrase. The same one from weeks ago. And it means the same thing now that it meant then. I feel the shift in my chest, not emotional, not heated, just a quiet click of clarity. My spine aligns a touch straighter. What internal step addresses falsified case files? I ask. She freezes for a fraction of a second, too quick for most. Long enough for me. Her gaze drops to her folder. Not the report. We don't have reason to believe there was misconduct. I let silence fill the space, heavy but controlled. Silence is pressure if you know how to hold it. She looks up, forced. Patrice, you're reading too much into the metadata. I answer calmly. The metadata is what it is. Her lips press into a thin line. She flips the HR folder open, not to take notes, not to reference anything, but to create a barrier between us, a shield. The movement is too practiced. She places her pen beside the folder, parallel to its edge. Perfect alignment. A perfection gesture. Usually from someone fighting for control of a situation that is slipping. I understand your concerns, she says, still avoiding the documents I brought. But the constraints on this case fall outside HR's discretionary scope. A sentence built entirely of exits. No doors actually open. No information actually given. I tap the blank space on the report where the erased paragraph once lived. This is evidence. That depends on interpretation, she answers. I keep my face still, but inside, something steadies. The steadiness I only get when the mask drops, when the truth stops hiding behind polite semantics. You're not accepting the submission, I say. We can't process it, she corrects gently, because of confidentiality. I take that in. 5 words rearranged into a barricade. Her eyes flick down and away, another tiny tell. Not guilt. Avoidance. She knows something. Or she knows not to know. The AC kicks on again, sending a cold draft across the table. A few sheets shift under the air. The sliding paper makes a sharp whisper, cutting through the room. I watch her carefully. Her jaw tightens, then releases. A trained motion, relax, relax, stay neutral. She picks up her pen but doesn't click it. Another gesture of restraint. Patrice, she says softly, these cases can be sensitive. Politically. There it is. The closest she'll get to telling the truth. Not legally sensitive, politically sensitive. Meaning someone above her, someone with power, wants this case untouched. I rest my fingers lightly against the cold table, grounding myself in the chill. Thank you for the clarification, I say. She blinks twice fast. The realization hits her that she's confirmed more than she meant to. But she nods anyway, relieved to close the meeting. I gather my files. I don't rush. I don't raise my voice. I don't explain myself. I don't need to. As I stand, the overhead lights throw a sharp reflection across the tables, surface a long silver streak running directly between us. In that line, in that brightness, in that silence, the truth settles fully. HR isn't clueless. HR isn't blocked. HR is covering. I step back from the table, the cold edge brushing against my fingertips one last time. Quietly, firmly. Without ceremony, the thought anchors in me. If they won't move, I will. Cold open. The screen light shifts from white to a muted blue as the internal log file finishes loading. The glow hits my cheekbone first, then slides across my face in a soft diagonal, the kind of lighting that makes everything feel colder than it is. The office behind me is dark now, no chatter, no footsteps, just the steady breath of the HVAC threading through the vents like a low hum. I lean closer. The log is long, too long. Lines of timestamps, user IDs, access events, ordinary at a glance, but nothing about the last 2 days has been ordinary. I scroll slowly, letting the details settle into my mind, one fragment at a time. Click. Scroll. Click. Each sound lands sharp against the stillness. My eyes trace the first anomaly. 1. After-hours access. A series of edits made at 2:14 a.m., then 2:16, then 2:21. No one from HR logs in after midnight. Not unless there's an emergency, and definitely not for a closed harassment case. The blue light shifts slightly as I tilt the screen, catching the sheen of my glasses. A faint reflection splits across the lens. I zoom in. The user ID for the edits is masked, hidden behind a generic administrator label. System, proxy action. That's not standard. That's not even allowed for sensitive files. My pulse doesn't quicken. It slows, steadies like my body is preparing for the precision required next. Proxy edits mean someone tried to cloak their identity, someone with enough system access to modify audit trails, someone who thinks no one with actual training will ever check. I scan further. A single line jumps out. Source replaced via copy-paste. Copy-paste. For a legal-sensitive case file. That alone is a breach. I pull back slightly, letting the information rearrange into pattern. Editing during off hours. Proxy identity. Copy-paste into a restricted report. Too sloppy to be professional error. Too coordinated to be accidental. I whisper to myself, barely moving my lips, more a breath than a sound. This wasn't incompetence. This was intention. I keep scrolling. Click, click, click. The log acts like a trail someone swept but not clean enough. They forgot the small specks. People usually do. They underestimate how closely someone like me reads this kind of pattern. An access event from a department that has no jurisdiction touches the file briefly, less than a minute before disappearing. The cursor blinks over the timestamp. Someone opened it. Someone looked. And someone closed it immediately. Not long enough to read, only long enough to check if the cover-up took. The HVAC hum deepens for a moment, almost like a low chord in a soundtrack. The kind directors use when the protagonist uncovers the clue that turns everything. I click into the revision details. A block of text is labeled replaced, but the replacement timestamp is identical to the deletion timestamp. One keystroke, one action. Erase and rewrite in the same breath. I run my thumb along the laptop frame. My nails tap lightly against the metal. Me grounding myself, organizing the noise. There's a deeper pattern here. I expand the system reference list. A second proxy user ID appears linked to the same department that denied involvement. I study the naming structure. Too clean. Too symmetrical. Generated to look official. Never used before. Never used after. Whoever did this wanted the log to appear intact, but intact is not the same as authentic. The HVAC clicks softly as it resets cycles, sending a faint vibration through the floor. I scroll further down. There, a tiny fragment in the error log. Conflict. Overwritten source mismatch. It's a system warning triggered when someone tries to paste over locked content. You only get it when you push past permission barriers, which means someone bypassed a lock, and they weren't supposed to. A slow breath moves up my spine, almost too quiet to register. The edges of the truth start lining themselves up, neat in their honesty, even if the report wasn't. I cross-referenced the proxy event ID with a secondary log. One match, a device name, not anonymized. A slip. I stare at it for a long second. A single oversight, the kind people make when they're too confident that no one is checking. I sit back, just slightly. The chair creaks under me, a soft protest in the silent room. The blue light from the screen glides upward as I lean away, painting a faint arc along my jawline. The trail isn't wide, but it's enough. Enough to see the shape of what happened. Enough to know this wasn't a glitch or a lazy edit. Someone wanted Alicia's words gone. Someone feared what they meant. Someone counted on the fact that HR would stall long enough for the trail to cool. But data has a temperature, and lies leave heat signatures. I scroll one last time. Click. Stop. The final proxy event ends abruptly, cut off mid-pattern, as if the person got nervous or rushed. The HVAC hum softens, dipping into a low, steady note. I press 2 fingers lightly against my temple, thinking through the chain again. Nothing here is random. Not the timing. Not the masking. Not the deletion. It all arranges into one truth. Clean, sharp, unavoidable. I draw a slow breath through my nose, steady enough to keep my hands still. Then the realization lands, quiet but heavy, the way a verdict lands inside your own mind before it ever hits paper. They didn't expect me to look this deep. Be honest. What would you do if it was you sitting in that room? Drop your thoughts below. I want to hear you. The hallway smells faintly of brewed coffee and sanitizer. My heels echo against polished concrete. I pause outside my office door cracked, sunlight spilling in from the corner window. It's late afternoon. Gold light stretches across the floor like molten honey, tracing long shadows of chairs and half-empty desks. She's there. Maria. New hire. Young. Her hands twist a lanyard. She won't meet my eyes. I close the door behind me. My fingertips brush the edge of the desk cold. Smooth. I lean against it, letting my shoulders sink slightly. It's just the two of us. I don't rush her. She said things. Maria murmurs. Her voice catches. A glance at her trembling hands, the subtle tremor of her jaw. I nod. Slowly. I want her words, but I let the silence expand, giving her space. My fingers curl around the edge of the desk. Knuckles blanch. Micro movement. My breath is measured. Every micro gesture counts. She speaks again. Every detail sharpens my stomach. A weight dropping from my chest into my gut. The edits in the report metadata, deleted paragraphs, they weren't mistakes. They were deliberate. My pulse steadies, but my mind races. Sunlight falls across my forearm, warm and fleeting. Shadows from the blinds cut stripes across my lap. I feel the gravity of responsibility. Not fear. Not panic. Gravity. I think of the whispered words in HR meetings, the half smiles, the polite deflections, the legal reviews, the anonymous emails. I recall the voice in my head, the cautionary tone of every Black woman navigating corporate halls. We don't get to be careless. The ethical calculus unfolds, rerouting this file, exposing the truth, the risk, my position, my reputation, my future, my body of work. Every factor I weigh silently. But I know. I meet her gaze. Mariah's eyes glisten. I rest a hand briefly on hers. A grounding gesture. Small, intimate, deliberate. Micro moment. She nods, a quiet resolve forming. The office hums. HVAC whispers. Light dims as the sun slides lower, bleeding gold into the sterile white. I let the moment linger. The weight on my shoulders doesn't shrink. It presses, but it clarifies. Silence is tempting. The easier path. I imagine it. my name untarnished, my career unshaken. But clarity truth presses against the temptation. I exhale, slowly. Fingers release the desk edge. I stand taller. Shadows stretch, elongating my own reflection across the floor. And I know it. Deep, undeniable. Silence isn't neutrality. It's surrender. I let the words settle. They resonate through the office. Through me. Through her. The light wanes further, orange fading into the edges of gray. I close the folder in front of me. Decisions are forming. Action is inevitable. Micro gestures of readiness ripple through me, tightening jaw, steady shoulders, deliberate inhale. Maria leaves first, her steps lighter than when she arrived. I watch her go. The door clicks. Quiet. Stillness. But I remain. Poised. Attentive. Resolved. The moral line is clear. The office is dark. Only the laptop glows, pale and blue, painting the walls in rectangles of cold light. My fingers hover above the keyboard. Each key a potential spark. Each click could shift the course of more than just numbers on a page. It could shift careers, reputations, lives. I breathe in slowly. Exhale. My chest rises and falls with quiet determination. The files are organized. Restored. The paragraphs HR tried to erase, the metadata I tracked, every deleted line now present, complete, unaltered. Accuracy is my weapon, precision my ally. I scroll through the report again. My thumb brushes the trackpad, hovering, indecision brief but palpable. Reflection from the screen catches the edge of my glasses. A flicker. My pupils dilate slightly. I note the tiny tremor in my left hand, tension held, controlled. The room smells faintly of old coffee and cleaning supplies. City sounds press through the glass walls. Distant traffic, muffled horns, a siren far away. Each noise, sharp against the quiet of the office. I notice how it highlights the stillness around me. Every breath, every micro movement becomes amplified. My phone vibrates beside me. Light spills across the desk, bouncing off the laptop, reflecting on the glass window, casting shards of gold into the pale blue. I glance at it. Ignore it. Focus. Discipline. One thing at a time. I've trained for moments like this. Every detail counts. I hover over the send button, fingers poised. For a heartbeat, hesitation lodges itself, subtle but insistent. It's instinct, caution. But I remember why I'm here. The truths HR tried to bury, the silences that could have crushed others. I press down. The files slide out of my control, into theirs. Independent review board. Not a shout, not a flare, just quiet accountability. The room exhales with me. Silence stretches like a drawn string, taut and vibrating. The hum of the HVAC becomes sharper. My own heartbeat drums in my ears, steady but insistent. I shift in my chair, slow, deliberate, fingers tingling from the press, from the knowledge of what I've just set in motion. I watch the glow of the screen, numbers and text reflected in my eyes. Shadows deepen in the corners of the office. I notice the dust motes floating, catching the light like tiny witnesses. I can't see their reaction. I can't hear it. I only know the truth is no longer confined to my hands. I lean back, letting my shoulders ease, though the weight lingers. The air smells faintly warmer now, scented by the city night sneaking through the ventilation. Each inhale carries tension. Each exhale, clarity. I imagine the files arriving at the board, the way someone might tilt their head, read, pause, maybe inhale sharply. The city outside glitters in fragmented light. Street lamps, office windows, traffic signals, witnesses in shadow. The reflection in the glass makes it feel like I am not alone. I am aware of every micro gesture in my own body. Tight jaw, Steady shoulders, deliberate inhale. My own presence is both a declaration and a promise. Time stretches. Seconds become minutes. I run a hand through my hair. Let it rest along my neck. Micro moments of tension ebb slightly, replaced by the gravity of what I've done. Not victory, not triumph, but truth. The air has shifted. I glance at my phone again, light still reflecting, now softer, indirect. I think about Maria, about the other voices that went unheard, about the weight that women like me carry silently in corporate corridors. Responsibility is not a choice. It is inherited, heavy and unyielding. I lean forward again, one last scroll. Every sentence, every paragraph, every name stands in relief against the glow. No edits, no erasures. The integrity is intact. I tap the touchpad, closing minor windows, one by one. Methodical, quiet, purposeful. I rise, stretching my shoulders. Shadows from the blinds cut long lines across the floor, stripes of light and dark dancing as I move. I stand still for a moment, hand resting lightly on the edge of the desk. Reflection of the city lights flickers in my eyes. I let the knowledge of what I've done sink in. Micro moments of pride, fear, anticipation, all contained in the stillness. Finally, I tilt my head toward the window. City lights scatter across the horizon, fractured and bright, like a constellation of witnesses waiting in shadow. I let the moment linger. Let the gravity of choice settle. Let the silence of action resonate. And in that quiet, I allow myself the thought, some truths need air. I just open the window. The laptop hums softly. The city hums beneath. My own heartbeat settles. The room is still, and I remain, poised, ready, unshaken. You won't believe what happens next. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. The boardroom smells of polished wood, faint coffee, and something sharper sterility mixed with authority. Morning light slices through tall windows, painting the table in crisp white lines. Shadows of executives stretch long and angular on the walls, distorted, waiting for movement that might never come. I sit at the far end of the table, notebook closed, fingers resting lightly on the cover. Breath slow, steady, every muscle relaxed but alert. The independent review board enters. Their presence is quiet, deliberate. No fanfare, no dramatics, just measured attention. The room hums with potential energy. HR enters, folder clutched as if it were a life preserver, fingers brushing the edge. The paper trembles faintly. She clears her throat. Her gaze slips to mine for a fraction of a second before darting away. Voice controlled but faltering. We reviewed the files. Everything appears. Her words trail. Incomplete. The tremor in her hand, the avoidance of eye contact, the slight shift of her shoulders, all of it speaks louder than the phrasing. Micro gestures become megaphones. I take note. Each subtle twitch, each pause, each breath unspoken. Other leaders sit rigidly. Fingers drum lightly against the table. Pens click. Chairs creak. Every sound amplified against the low hum of the HVAC. I sit still, poised, letting it all wash over me. Observation as power. Awareness as leverage. They begin presenting their findings. Metadata, timestamps, emails, edits, all the restored lines, unaltered. Each fact laid bare. My own fingers rest lightly on the notebook, pencil poised but still. I nod occasionally, barely perceptible micro gestures, enough to mark the alignment of evidence and reality. HR shifts again. Hand smoothing the folder, thumb tapping nervously, avoids eye contact. Her jaw tightens imperceptibly, a silent admission. I note the micro shift of her weight. the flicker of her gaze. Nothing overt, yet everything communicates her unease. The room stretches. Discussions unfold in measured tones, each word deliberate, each phrase cautious. The board asks clarifying questions. No accusations, no confrontation, just methodical examination. HR responds with clipped answers, voice barely above neutral. Micro failures of control leak through. A finger drumming, a breath held too long, a quick glance downward. I take a slow, deliberate breath. Shoulders relax. Jaw unclenches. Hands rest lightly, letting the gravity of observation anchor me. I am the constant, the fulcrum, the quiet pivot around which the room shifts. Micro gestures from others ripple through the table, subtle yet telling. Pen slides, shoulder relaxes, chair squeaks as someone leans forward, adjusting posture. The tide turns, unnoticed by most, but not by me. The weight of responsibility presses lightly on my spine. I think of every Black woman navigating these halls, walking carefully, speaking strategically, observing constantly. We inherit invisible rules, our moves calculated, our silence weaponized, and yet here, my silence, my measured presence, becomes the instrument of change. Minutes stretch, each one feeling like an hour. HR's trembling fingers relax, but her gaze still avoids mine. She speaks in clipped sentences, correcting slides, adjusting phrasing. Leaders exchange subtle nods, quick flicks of paper, micro movements acknowledging what they see but haven't yet voiced. I do not need to intervene. I simply allow the truth, presented methodically, to work. A subtle shift happens. Chairs settle differently. Eyes flicker with comprehension. Small micro gestures. A shoulder relaxes. A pen stops tapping. A hand unclenches. Quiet power, unspoken, yet undeniable. HR leans back, exhaling softly. Relief, shame, acknowledgement mixed, interwoven. She does not meet my gaze, but I see the shift in her body. I adjust my posture, fingers tracing the notebook edge. One small nod to myself, barely perceptible. Breath steady. Micro gestures of awareness, reflection, quiet victory. No drama, no confrontation, just a shift, a change in the room's gravity. The board leans slightly forward, silent acknowledgement. Their questions now less guarded, more precise, more aligned with truth than deflection. Leaders who once glanced away now engage with the material fully. No hedging. Accountability doesn't shout, it creeps, subtle, insistent, undeniable. I watch HR's hands. The tremor fades. Fingers rest lightly atop the folder. Her jaw unclenches slightly. Eyes meet mine for a second. No words, just recognition. Micro-acknowledgement. Quiet, human, necessary. The light across the table grows brighter, illuminating small details, the corner of a report, the edge of a notebook, a shadow retreating along the wall. Shadows that once loomed large now shrink, bending subtly toward the light. And in that quiet, deliberate stillness, I realize power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need theatrics. It slides, it shifts. It bends under the weight of observation, persistence, and truth meticulously presented. Power doesn't always flip loudly. Sometimes it just shifts. I exhale, slowly, releasing any tension. The hum of the HVAC, the faint clicks of pens, the muted scratching of paper all harmonize into a subtle symphony of accountability. I close my notebook lightly, fingers brushing the smooth cover. I remain, poised, still an observer and participant at once. Shadows retreat slightly. The light stabilizes across polished wood. The room has changed. Not dramatically, not visibly to an outsider, but the shift is real, micro, silent, undeniable. And for the first time that morning, I allow a small, satisfied breath. The quiet has become movement. The shift has begun. The office is quiet. Sunlight slices through the blinds, painting long stripes across the polished floor. The city hums faintly outside, distant, indifferent. I sit at my desk, laptop open, the glow reflecting in my glasses. Fingers hover lightly above the keyboard, deliberate, measured. I review the files one last time. Metadata, timestamps, restored paragraphs all intact. Accuracy is my weapon. Precision, my shield. But this isn't enough. The truth doesn't exist in isolation. It needs to reach others. A soft exhale. I begin to type. The email is careful, neutral, but firm. No names called, no accusations. Just clarity, guidance, reassurance. How employees can access the independent review, how to protect themselves, how to document what they've witnessed. Every word chosen for weight and consequence. I pause before hitting send. Fingers hover. The soft hum of the HVAC fills the room. Shadows stretch across the walls, elongated by the low sunlight. I press enter. The ripple begins. Immediately, subtle shifts unfold. Across the office, screens light up. People glance down, scanning lines carefully. At first, they read silently, posture tight. Then almost imperceptibly, shoulders relax. Eyes meet those of a neighbor. A small nod exchanged. A quiet smile. Recognition. Validation. Relief. I watch them. Micro gestures magnified in slow motion. A hand brushing over a keyboard, a pen lifted and paused, lips pressed together and then eased into a subtle exhale. The awareness spreads, unspoken but powerful. The community begins to acknowledge itself. I lean back, fingers lightly resting on the desk. My own breath even. Steady. The impact is subtle but undeniable. I see them gaining courage, not loudly but steadily, methodically. The truth has been released into their hands, and they hold it with care. The sun dips lower, casting warmer hues across the room. Shadows of passing employees stretch long along the walls. One pauses, glances toward my desk, eyes catching mine briefly. A flash of gratitude, trust, understanding. I nod once, nearly imperceptibly. Micro gesture, but full of weight. I think of Maria, of the whispers, the hushed conversations, the moments of fear. I realize now, the power I wielded in that boardroom was only the beginning. The real shift, longer, quieter, more potent, is happening in the way my colleagues will carry themselves from here. Each small action, each cautious smile, each whispered acknowledgement, building momentum. I close my eyes briefly. Fingers brush lightly along the notebook's edge. The office, once heavy with silent tension, now feels different. The subtle warmth of connection spreads across the floor, across the desks, into the corners of the room. Ripple effect. Quiet. Steady. Relentless. When I look up, employees pass through the hallways. Faces a little lighter, posture a little surer. Micro moments of empowerment everywhere. Someone pauses mid-step to pick up a discarded folder for a teammate. Another offers a quiet nod of encouragement across the room. These small, almost invisible gestures carry enormous weight. I rise, moving toward the window. Light spills across my face, warm and golden, highlighting every line, every decision etched into my expression. Outside, the city continues its indifferent hum, but inside, a subtle shift has occurred. A culture of awareness, protection, and courage has begun to take root, and in that quiet, cinematic moment, I let the thought settle. Change isn't silent. It spreads, and it finds its people. I exhale. Fingers relax completely now. The ripple has started. I can feel it, though it moves slower than the heartbeats of those who first receive it. The room hums faintly, alive in its quiet, subtle way, and I remain, poised, steady, aware, knowing that what I began in that boardroom now flows outward into every corridor, every desk, every glance. If you've ever been overlooked or underpaid, this part's for you. And if you feel that, hit Bath City outside glimmers in twilight, gold and silver threads woven across the skyline. Inside, the office is quiet, but no longer heavy. There's a hum, not of fear, not of tension, but of possibility. I sit at my desk, laptop closed, hands resting lightly atop the surface. The glow from the screens around me reflects in my glasses, fragmented, scattered like the impact of what has unfolded. The files, once buried, now in circulation. The whispers, once fearful, now carry recognition. The ripple has traveled farther than I could see. I breathe, slowly. In, out. Each inhale reminds me of why I started this path, not for credit, not for power, but for the truth, and for the people whose voices had been silenced. Each exhale releases tension, acknowledges the weight, lets it settle into purpose. I glance around the office. Small moments of courage are everywhere. A hand lifting a document for a colleague, eyes meeting across a hallway in quiet understanding, someone finally taking the time to speak, carefully but firmly. I see them holding their heads higher, knowing they are seen, their experiences validated. Micro gestures speak louder than grand declarations. I notice a young woman stopping at my desk, sliding a folder back into place with a faint smile. Someone else adjusts a chair, subtly, in acknowledgement of another's space. These small, quiet acts are proof. Change is alive. It's living in the people, not the documents. I remember the journey, the falsified edits, the metadata anomalies, the HR deflections, the boardroom, the quiet power of truth. I remember Maria, and every other voice that trembled in the shadows. All of them led to this small moments building into momentum, courage spreading silently, irreversibly. A soft exhale. Fingers brush the edge of my notebook. I let my gaze linger on the city, the horizon widening in muted gold. Responsibility remains, always. Change is never complete, but what matters is the start. The signal sent into the system, the consciousness awakened. I rise, shoulders straighten, hands relaxed, deliberate. I walk slowly toward the window. The light reflects across my face. Shadows stretch and bend. I feel the weight of every choice, every act of courage, every risk taken. And I realize, truth has a way of demanding its own space, of breathing life into what was once hidden. I think quietly, almost to myself, justice needs data and courage. The office is still, but alive. The hum of lights, the soft shuffle of papers, the occasional distant laughter, they are all part of the new rhythm. Micro moments that carry immense weight. I know the work continues. I know the culture shifts slowly, one action at a time. I stand taller, letting the moment settle. Power is not a shout. Change is not sudden. Truth is a light that spreads, quietly, insistently, until it can no longer be ignored. And in that quiet, cinematic pause, I let it resonate. The lessons are clear, the message, unwavering. Immunity belongs to no one. Silence only protects the guilty. Courage protects the many. The sun dips fully below the horizon, city lights sparkling like scattered stars. I watch, steady, knowing this chapter is just one of many. The ripple will continue. I have done what I was meant to do. Open the window, let the truth breathe, and empower others to carry it forward. And for the first time in hours, days, months, years, I feel it. Quiet satisfaction, resolute power, and the unmistakable pulse of justice taking root. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this story. If it spoke to you, hit subscribe and stay tuned for more stories that heal, inspire, and remind us who we are. For every Black woman told to stay quiet, speak anyway.